All right, folks, why don't we begin? Um, Thank you all so much for joining. Welcome to our webinar, the Rise Economy webinar. What's at stake? Consumer protections and the future of California communities. We're really excited about the discussion we're about to have. Again, if people want to let us know who you are by putting your name in the chat, that would be great. We also have a question. There's a Q&A button at the bottom that you'll see. So if people have questions at any point throughout the conversation, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. The
Kevin,
panelists, yeah.
people are saying in the Q&A that the chat is disabled. So I don't know, Jose or Adrian, just to flag that if there's a way to open the chat.
Well, then I feel a little bit better because I thought nobody was putting anything in the chat, and I don't know. I've been in a meeting where nobody has chatted. So sorry for that. If we find out that, well, I guess we'll know if the chat is working. We'll see some chat activity. Hopefully the Q&A will also be working because we do want to get to your questions. The way this is structured is Paulina is going to ask our esteemed panelists a number of questions that are touching on some very timely issues. But we are reserving some time at the end for your questions. So we do want to hear from you all. And if the Q&A is working, then I think the panelists will be able to see that in real time. And so people may address your questions as they're making their comments. So do feel free to use the chat. You may all have realized that we are recording the conversation, and we're going to make the recording available to everybody who's registered. So you can look forward to that as well. In terms of our, why are we doing this? What is happening? What is happening? We know that for Rise Economy members and allies, this has been a very challenging time. We're seeing continuous attacks on our rights, on our values, on the programs that groups are using to serve their clients, on funding streams to serve their communities, on agencies they rely on to support their networks. We know that people are feeling a lot of things at this time. There's anger, there's frustration, there's a lot of uncertainty, and in some cases, there's real fear about what is happening. This is why we wanted to hold the webinar. We wanted to be able to answer some questions and to have us continue to think about a way forward. In terms of what Rise Economy is doing, we're doing what we've always done. We're tracking these developments at the federal level. So we're looking to see what changes are on the horizon and occurring in areas where our members are impacted. We are particularly focused on changes and threats to the Community Reinvestment Act and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and in particular, the Section 1071 Small Business Data Collection Rule that we all feel so invested in. At the state level, we're really excited to be pushing for a state Community Reinvestment Act. We hope this is something that you're not hearing about for the first time, that you're aware of it and that you're supporting it, or that you will be supporting it. We're also pushing a public banking option as an alternative to the mainstream finance that has let us down a bit over time. And we continue to meet with financial institutions, with banks in particular, to hold them accountable to better serving our communities. We know that over the last few weeks and months, there's a lot going on, that you've been asked to do a lot, including by Rise Economy. We just want to take a moment to appreciate your support for our efforts, for your continued advocacy, all at a time when you're continuing just to try and serve your communities, and it's becoming harder to do so. We have a really fantastic panel. I know I feel good just seeing I saw their, we can see their actual faces. Even seeing their photos makes me happy, because these are folks who are real champions for consumers and for our communities, and they've been friends of Rise Economy and our allies for, in some cases, for quite some time. We really appreciate them, and we appreciate you all for joining us. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my boss, Paulina Gonzalez Brito, the CEO of Rise Economy, to moderate the discussion.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm not yet comfortable with anybody calling me their boss, but but I guess I'll take it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, spending a part of your afternoon talking with us. As Kevin noted, we know that this is a time of great uncertainty and fear and anxiety, but it gives me a lot of hope to know that not only our panelists, but all of you are out there in the community fighting back and protecting the rights of the communities that we work with every day. And so I'm glad to see you all today. I will start off by introducing our panelists, telling you a little bit about them. I'm going to jump into some questions to engage in conversation, and then we'll turn to the Q&A function for any questions that you might have. Please, as you hear anything that's interesting to you or that you have questions about, please feel free to ask your question in the Q&A, and we'll get to those. So I'll start by introducing our panelists, and thank you to them for joining with us today. We know they're really busy, but really grateful that they're here. And so I'll start by introducing Director Rohit Chopra. He was the country's third director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where he zealously protected consumers via enforcement actions against repeat corporate offenders of consumer protection law and through rulemaking such as the Section 1071 Small Business Data Collection Rule. Director Chopra has also served as a member of the board of directors of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and the Financial Stability Oversight Council, as a commissioner on the Federal Trade Commission, and as the nation's student loan ombudsman at the CFPB. Prior to his government service, Director Chopra worked at McKinsey & Company, the global management consultancy firm, and Director Chopra holds a BA from Harvard University and an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He has received numerous awards, including the coveted Rise Economy Equitable Futures Award a couple of years ago. Next, I'll introduce Rachel Freed. Rachel is senior counsel at Democracy Forward. Prior to joining Democracy Forward, Rachel was a clinical fellow and staff attorney with the Civil Litigation Clinic at Georgetown University Law Center, an associate at Covington and Burling LLP, a clerk for judges at both the federal district and appellate court levels, and a graduate from Yale Law School. Rachel has experience litigating the Administrative Procedures Act, FOIA, and other public interest matters. Rachel and Democracy Forward have represented Rise Economy in challenging the OCC's harmful CRA rulemaking during the prior Trump administration, as well as the Trump CFPB's failure to develop Section 1071, the Small Business Data Collection Rule. And last but not least, Allie Blume. Allie is Special Assistant Attorney General at the California Department of Justice, where she also served as a legal and policy advisor on economic justice. Prior to that, she served as director at the Department of Defense and as counsel at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Her expertise includes consumer protection, antitrust, and labor law. Ellie earned a Juris Doctor from the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology from Wellesley College, and is a recipient of the Office of the Secretary of Defense Award for Excellence. So thank you to our esteemed guests. We really appreciate you joining us. And I'm just going to jump into questions. And the first one is for all three of you, whoever wants to start. If you could share with us your take on the current state of consumer protection and community development in our nation and in California. What do you see as the biggest assaults on consumers and communities that have come and that have yet to come? And what do you see as your role in this moment of countless attacks on our rights and protection? So, Director Chopra, I saw you on mute, so you can go first.
Well, Paulina, thank you so much for inviting me, and also really just want to thank all the familiar names I see who are joining us today. It's really the power of local organizations helping tenants, homeowners, small businesses. We need every single one of you to be more active than ever because we have some big problems on our hands. One is that there is growing concerns that a recession may be coming. And there's also a concerted effort. It's not getting that much attention, but to really defund the police that looks after Wall Street and the financial industry. All of this could create a recipe for disaster for so many people in California and across the country. We're already seeing some serious signs of stress. The percentage of people who are making minimum payments on their credit cards is at a high. The distress on subprime auto loans has been going up and up. And the amount of challenges people are now having with the restart of student loan payments, it's actually led average credit scores to tick down. And this is, by the way, on top of really serious problems when it comes to the horrific wildfires that harmed Los Angeles and the surrounding areas. So we are going to need to jujitsu on so many dimensions. We need to make sure that there is not systemic harm and predation that targets our communities. We have to make sure we are rebuilding people whose homes and neighborhoods have been destroyed. And we need to make sure that we're putting into place real protections at the state and federal level to actually address the challenges of our time. And I know that there's a lot of issues that individual organizations are facing. There are funding pressures. Every day feels like chaos, but we have to continue to all work together to address them. So, Paulina, just to answer your question more directly, things are a disaster, but each day that we shy away from it is another day where it could get worse. And we have to be in a moment right now to advocate, stand up, and push to make sure we get through this moment.
Thank you, Director Chopra. And you mentioned state level action, and I wonder, Ellie, if you want to weigh in on this question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this conversation is very timely. And Rohit and Paulina, you have kicked us off perfectly here. We are facing a man-made economic crisis right now. I think the threat of recession and of harm to California households, to American households, is very real. And we see today that threat get even greater with the dismantling of the CFPB and the RIFs that were announced today. We are seeing more than 1,000 cops pulled off the beat, the people who are supposed to be keeping an eye on ensuring that the financial institutions, big banks, the non-banks, are playing by the rules, are being pulled off. And so as we face this moment of economic chaos and an intentional creation of chaos, and we are seeing the federal government intentionally unequipping itself, then the role of the small businesses, of civil society coalitions, of the state attorneys general, of our nonprofit partners is even greater than it was before January, than it was before today. That role grows even more important. I think that we are seeing very real stress already on small businesses, on medium-sized businesses, on tenants, on homeowners who are feeling economic risk. We have layered on top of that now these really chaotically implemented tariffs that are expected to cost average households thousands of dollars each year. And I think that Americans today are really desperate for real solutions in the midst of this chaos and the increasing vulnerability of our households. And so as the state attorney generals, our job is twofold. One is to not allow the president to run roughshod over the Constitution and not allow the attempted oligarchy that we are seeing right now succeed. And two is to deliver on real solutions, to deliver on a vision for how to address the really straightforward pocketbook issues that American families are experiencing and that are being exacerbated every day by the kind of actions that we are seeing this administration take. I'll say I think that very fortunate as attorney general's offices to have some tools through litigation, through legislation, through the public discourse like this, to try to direct and to focus and to build coalition around having that positive vision for how we can continue to advance the infrastructure of consumer protection even in this moment of really intentional dismantling, and to try to stop the president from giving big banks and debt collectors and predatory lenders a free pass, and to try to hold back some of that chaos that we are seeing in the economy right now.
Thank you. Rachel, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And sorry to be another harbinger of doom, but just to pile on, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, the current state of consumer protection in the country is at risk, to say the least. And just to add some detail to what Ali was saying about how the federal government is essentially unequipping itself to handle the economic crisis to come, we're seeing the current administration's CFPB just stop defending the rules, regulations, guidance that that it worked so hard to produce over the past 5 years. And so not only are we going to be dealing with an economic crisis, but we're going to have a government that's unable to respond to it or unwilling to respond to it. And to just give one example of that, as Kevin mentioned, the Section 1071 rulemaking that was so long coming, that the CFPB has, currently decided to stop defending in the court cases that are challenging it. And that rule requires covered financial institutions to collect and report information related to applications for credit for women-owned, minority-owned, or small businesses. And this is really crucial data to collect for enforcing fair lending laws, because without it, it would be really difficult to identify if or where financial institutions are discriminating against businesses owned by people of color and women. And the financial services industry has challenged this rule in many cases, and in all of them, the CFPB has recently said it no longer plans to defend this rule and even plans to revisit it. And the same is happening with regard to other rules and regulations that are being challenged in the courts. So consumers are at risk of losing the hard-won protections of the past 5 years, and including some that have only recently gone into effect or were scheduled to go into effect soon. As far as how I see my role, so as a litigator, I just see my role as using the courts to try to stop the Trump administration's unlawful and anti-democratic actions, with the help of our valued partners and allies.
Well, we definitely appreciate the role that Democracy is Forward is playing in the courts to push back against some of these actions by the administration. It's really, it gives me some hope that we're able to push back and protect our communities in this time. So thank you to the three of you for sharing your thoughts on that. I'm sorry if it feels to our everybody participating kind of like doom and gloom, but I think there is reason for hope as well. And I will turn to Director Chopra with the next question. We've heard a little bit just now about the CFPB's and Congress's efforts to roll back rules such as the overdraft rule, payday lending, credit union, credit card rules, as well as today's announcement that the CFPB will be shifting enforcement away from non-banks and also shifting more enforcement to the states. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what consumers stand to lose and also what we might be thinking about doing in California in this moment as that moves forward.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. What is happening currently in Washington at the CFPB is just going to create the conditions for crime against consumers. There will be more scams, fraud. It would go undetected. And what's really interesting, Pauline, I'm just hearing from some media, apparently they're going to fire everybody who works on fair lending. And that's really, it's really revealing in some ways, about where they're going. So I think though, I'm actually not in the mode of doom. I'm actually in the mode that now is a time where we got to all put our heads together. How will we actually work with our state attorneys general, like Rob Bonta and Ellie Blume? And really, how can we start getting creative on new types of state laws? Certainly, there has been efforts to crack down on all sorts of junk fees at the state level. There's also state laws across the country that are getting passed to limit medical debt on credit reports. Those are in some ways small ones, but we also have opportunities to really create stronger protections for small business owners, for homeowners, consumers, on just a wide range of other things. You mentioned Community Reinvestment Act, a state level Community Reinvestment Act. You know, many of us think a lot about this. What's the way in which banking and the financial system can really serve everybody and really be something that gets everyone's ship lifted? What can we also do to create more public options for people who are closed out of the system? I'm really interested, Pauline, on what we can do to fix what feels like our broken property insurance system. You know, across California, this is really where I'm worried. All sorts of homeowners are facing notices of, they call it non-renewal. I mean, it's cancellation. They can't get homeowners insurance or it's so damn expensive. The net result of this is that it will lead to cash and investor buyers only. You can't get a mortgage without sufficient property insurance. This is going to accelerate gentrification. It's going to harm so many people. And so most of insurance is actually regulated at the state level. So we have to think about what are the ways in which California can have laws, regulations, and actions that will actually show there is a way, a different way than what is happening with whatever the hell we're seeing in Washington, D.C., of chaos and crime. And that's exactly what's going to happen if you shut down the CFPB. So I think we've got to, as part of this, it's not just us talking. I think the list of attendees, and I've seen where the organizations they're all working with, I think we have to really come together to figure out what's going to be our top priorities for addressing the most pressing issues facing people in California. We want you all to do a lot because other states, they're doing some creative things, and we all need to be learning from each other on this. We also need to provide a lot of support to people like Ellie Blume and Rob Bonta, who are going to have to fill in for some of the gaps with no real federal law enforcement doing their jobs. We're going to have to bring them issues, stories, numbers about the harms that are happening in people's financial lives. And we're going to have to start thinking about how are our small businesses and homeowners going to weather what could be a pretty rocky recession? So I'd love for us to not be in a mindset of doom, but in a mindset of what's our homework assignments and how do we need to create connections with each other so that we can go in with a strong voice of where things need to change.
Thank you, Director. Ellie, I wonder if you can speak some to, what the Attorney General can be doing as a cop on the beat, as the CFPB is where it is, and what, the Director spoke a bit about what we can be doing to help, but I wonder if you have some advice for us on what we can be doing to help in this moment.
Absolutely. And I love Rohit's not doom and gloom. And the cheerleading, both for what we can do as the organizations gathered here, what we can do as Californians, and what we can do as state attorneys general. And he is absolutely right that we need your help. We need your help with the stories. We need your support. And I do think that while we see Congress giving big banks a pass, and while we see the Trump administration dismantling the entire infrastructure of federal consumer protection and financial regulation, we also have a very fired up California. I can tell you that Rob Bonta is very fired up, and our legislature is very fired up. And we were pretty energetic before January, but now there is even more urgency and hunger for ensuring that we here in California, in the fifth largest economy in the world, we are really rising to the moment and to the challenge that we have. There are certain things that we won't be able to do as states. There are certain limitations we have where we need the federal government. But until we hit that wall, then I think that we need to be, and we can be, and we want to be, in a race to the top among the states to try to do as much as we can here to fill in the gaps, and also do more, do better, and be as creative and visionary as we can sitting here in California. We had already tried to capitalize on the leadership and the partnership that we saw out of the CFPB under Rohit's leadership. And we enacted, governor signed a bill in California removing medical debt from consumer credit reports. I think that's tremendously important. That's one where we've seen a lot of energy out of the states to do that. Same with junk fees, with the elimination of junk fees throughout much of the economy in California, not entirely, but much of the economy in California. And we are there again, seeing other states borrow from that and think about what they can do. We also had issued a letter to smaller banks and credit unions, borrowing from a lot of the work that the CFPB had done to clarify that our view in California is that under California law, there are certain overdraft and NSF practices that are also unlawful and apply to those smaller banks and credit unions that were not subject to the Bureau's rules. So I think we really benefit right now from the momentum that came out of several years of really good partnership with the CFPB, and need the ongoing support and partnership of everybody gathered here to continue to identify opportunities for and run toward opportunities to do as much here in California as we can to advance this positive progressive vision of an economy here. And also, I think we need to be really clear-eyed about the kinds of struggles that we will see families in this state and across the country face as delinquencies rise, as people really struggle to make their payments, as people struggle to figure out where they're going to pay the tariff tax out of limited family budgets. And so we are in this moment where there's a tremendous amount of energy out of the Attorney General and out of the legislature, and where we are going to see increasing pressure and need out of the household economics here in the state.
You mentioned the tariffs, Ellie, and I wonder if you can speak to some. We heard the news that the Attorney General was challenging Trump's tariffs. I wonder if you can share more with us about that and what we might expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So we filed just yesterday. That was yesterday. We filed a lawsuit yesterday challenging the tariffs that are being implemented under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. So not all the tariffs, not the sectoral tariffs, but the tariffs that are being promulgated under the one specific emergency economic powers. And we're alleging that the president doesn't have the singular power to radically upend the country's economic landscape. This is something that we are already seeing have impact here in California, both for the state as a purchaser or procurer of goods, and also as a state with very robust trade relationships as an importer and exporter with all of the countries that have been impacted by the tariffs. I think our concern here is really driven not only by the president continuing to flout the rule of law and act as though he's above the law and breaching the separation of powers that is really essential to our system of government, but also because the gravity of the economic situation and the instability that businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses in California and households and consumers in California are experiencing really can't be overstated. That there is very real economic chaos that threatens to throw us into recession, that threatens to have very severe impact on our businesses, on our households, and on the state's economy as a whole.
Can I just jump in on this, which is,
Yeah.
I really want, I want all of our community organizations to sort of be able to discern how it might affect them, which is one of the places where we're seeing, and I just looked at the average 30-year mortgage, and it's at a multi-month high. What's happening is that the tariffs, or at least how they've been rolled out, has actually really affected how the global markets are valuing the dollar, how they're valuing US Treasury bonds. And the mechanisms are a little complicated, but the more that the value of our Treasury bonds is going down, that is actually what a lot of our mortgage rates are tied to. So the 30-year fixed mortgage roughly tracks a common treasury bond, the 10-year treasury note. So when that is becoming less valuable, it's actually making it more expensive for homeowners to borrow. And for others, if we think about small businesses who are selling apparel, selling toys, whatever it may be, it's not overnight that they can come up with new suppliers, or overnight that there'll just be these new factories that come out of the ground. So they too might get squeezed, and many of them are kind of panicking about what do they do, especially during this pause. So I just want to make sure that while there is a lot of national news about tariffs and trade, that we're really focusing the conversation on how it's impacting families through interest rates on their loans, their own job and employment situation, as well as Main Street businesses and local businesses, about how it's affecting them. Because I think we should all make sure we are allied to help them navigate through this, because they are going to be the first that have to close up shop or face serious financial ruin. And that's what we have to guard against.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rohit. Really good focusing. I think that's exactly the problem.
Yeah. I want to encourage attendees to ask their questions in the Q&A, and I promise we'll get to them. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen a question mark with a little chat box that says Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions in there, and we'll get to them. Rachel, you mentioned a bit about SB 1071, Section 1071, sorry, and the importance of the rule for small businesses, for us to be able, and just thinking about its importance for being able to identify where there is discrimination occurring, where Black small businesses are not getting loans, where Latinx, Asian American, like it's just the tool, the data would have really been helpful as we think about how fair lending issues and small business lending. And we were proud to be the organization of plaintiff on challenging the CFPB under the previous Trump administration. And now the rule, I believe, is getting rescinded. Is that right? And so it's caught up in litigation. The CFPB won't defend it. I wonder if you can say, if you can look into a crystal ball, where you think we're headed, and if we had a settlement with the CFPB for a timeline for them to develop the rule, and now there's no rule. So I wonder, are they in violation of the settlement? Is there anything we can do here? What is your take on this?
Sure. Well, so technically there is still a rule now, so that's that's good news. So yeah, so Democracy Forward represented Rise Economy, then the California Reinvestment Coalition in suing the CFPB to get a court to require them to issue the Section 1071 rule, which Congress directed that they issue. And so, as you mentioned, there was a settlement whereby the CFPB agreed to a timeline to go through the notice and comment rulemaking process and issue the final rule, which it did in 2023. And since that time, the financial services industry has challenged the rule in several cases across the country. And what we've been seeing there is, as far as the courts that have actually addressed the merits, the rule has been upheld. Like the Southern District of Texas upheld the lawfulness of the small business lending rule. That's currently on appeal in the Fifth Circuit, where unfortunately the court has permitted the parties after the change in administration to essentially put the appeal on hold and also toll the compliance deadlines with respect to the plaintiffs in that case, while the current CFPB was going to figure out if they were going to continue defending the rule, which now we learned that they are not. Same thing happened in another district court case, ongoing challenge that's been stayed. There's another case in the Southern District of Florida, which challenges the application of the Section 1071 rule to merchant cash advances, which is a particular type of financing tool that essentially it looks a lot like a loan in practice. And there, again, a magistrate judge issued a report and recommendation recommending that the rule be upheld. And what recently happened is the plaintiffs there again asked the court to stay the case, stay the compliance deadlines. The CFPB in a filing, agreed and said, yes, that's a great idea. And also we're planning to revisit the rule to go through notice and comment. And so Democracy Forward filed an amicus brief in that case on behalf of some consumer protection organizations, and we filed a supplemental amicus brief just last Friday urging the court to not stay the case because actually an agency does not have the authority to modify compliance deadlines in a final rule without going through notice and comments. So we don't think the stays in the other cases are proper. And so the motion to stay in this this case in Florida is still pending, so we'll have to see. That said, of course, any agency can revisit a final rule whenever it wants, but the key is it has to go through the notice and comment rulemaking process. So I think ultimately it's up to the courts to enforce that. So we're kind of still waiting and seeing what happens in the cases.
Well, thank you. Our members worked really hard on Section 1071 and advocating for it for, I don't know how long, Kevin, a long time. So it's really important to them and really important to communities. So thank you for your work to defend it and to see it come into fruition.
Paulina, do you mind if I just say one thing on this?
Absolutely, please do.
So one of the things that can be really pernicious is a lot of times people who are subject to a illegal foreclosure, debt collection action, they might know it's happening to them. But for many people, and we've seen study after study, the CFPB did one, others have done them, they go and try and get information about a small business loan. And sometimes they're just told, well, why don't you open a credit card, or, you know, we don't have anything for you. And then you end up finding that it's happening to certain types of people. And I think this was part of really, Paulina, what all of us have been wondering for years is we lost so many small businesses during the pandemic. Many of them were shut out of PPP loans. And I hope it wasn't because they were turned away due to discriminatory practices. So if we are going to have another real challenging economic situation, we do not want to see the small businesses in California or anywhere, to see their fate determined based on, what their owner looks like. So I think the stakes of this one are pretty big.
Yeah, thank you for underscoring the importance of this data collection rule. I want to turn to some of we were just talking before we started about kind of the heartbreaking nature of this administration's attack on immigrants. Recently, for instance, the administration announced they were canceling Social Security numbers legally obtained by immigrants with temporary legal status. The IRS also announced it was going to collaborate with DHS, with ICE to help locate taxpayers, locate immigrants who file taxes with ITIN numbers. And we've worked, and our members have worked for years for the financial inclusion of immigrants to have full access to the financial system and the economic system and to be able to participate fully, as well as do that to someday be able to naturalize, right? And I wonder, as we face these attacks on immigrants and this type of collaboration between the IRS and ICE, what we can and should be doing in this moment as immigrants come under attack, and we're seeing this type of collaboration between agencies to try to exclude them. That's open to anyone.
Well, I'll just start by saying that there are so many of us whose families immigrated here, and putting aside the feelings we have about that, about how the people are being treated right now. At the end of the day, there are still some laws on the books that really do protect people against discriminatory practices. It's not lawful to simply deny people certain types of banking services purely because of their nationality or whatever it may be. So we're going to need to keep thinking and working together about how to make sure that those individuals are not pushed out of being able to participate in the economy. I think there's sometimes broad language used to label people, which is wrong. And we in fact are seeing people with green cards, people who are citizens who immigrated, who are facing those threats. So we really got to get to the bottom of what we're going to do about this. And I'm sorry that I don't have a real clear recipe of what to do, but we're just going to need to all work together on this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I don't have a clear silver bullet to fix this particular problem, that I think we see the federal administration really focused on trying to marginalize, disenfranchise, economically disenfranchise and push out people who have come to this country. And it is deeply disturbing. It is a persistent obsession on their part. And I think it is going to take the collective effort of our civil society partners, the state attorneys general, ongoing public discourse expressing our outrage at the situation, the laws that we do already have on the books and the courts to uphold those laws, to come together and meet each of the moments that we see here. I think we're going to wind up with, as we've already seen, as I'm sure we will continue to see, very specific examples of people being targeted because of where their families come from, because of the color of their skin. And we need to have the collective effort of everybody gathered here, your membership, our nonprofit and litigation partners, our allies in the public sector and in civil society, to really respond to that moment. And what exactly that looks like in each individual case, I think is going to need to be tailored to it. So I don't have a silver bullet. I can tell you we are very concerned. We are paying very close attention, and everything that we can hear from all of you and what we see brought to the courts, and what we see enter into the public discourse and what comes to us directly informs everything that the teams working here in the Attorney General's office are able to do.
Thank you, Ellie. Did you want to add anything, Rachel?
Not much to add, just that Democracy Forward is also really concerned about this and is looking into it and excited to work with others on finding a solution.
Great, thank you. Director Chopra, we talked about, or Kevin mentioned, and then you touched on state CRA. We expect there to be the very least, less enforcement around the Federal Community Reinvestment Act, perhaps banks taking a step back and their CRA obligations at the federal level. We are really proud to sponsor AB 801 with Assemblywoman Bonta, which would create, we're sponsoring it with SEIU, California Housing Partnership, and Inclusive Action for the City. And it would create a California Community Reinvestment Act. A few years ago, the CFPB issued a report on state community reinvestment acts, which we found to be very helpful. So thank you for doing that. We still use it today. I wonder if you can speak to why the CFPB developed that report, and if you could speak to the importance of state CRA efforts, especially in this moment.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is a good reminder for everybody is banking actually is something that is a community effort. We pool all of our deposits, and then our deposits actually are transformed into opportunities and loans for people. And one of the concerns is that sometimes large financial institutions might open up a branch and take a lot of deposits, but then ship those deposits elsewhere to be lent, not from the community who is contributing to those deposits. We see this as a huge issue in rural areas, and a number of areas in California. So there is a federal law. We obviously need state laws to be companions. There's also this other interesting dimension, which is that the Federal Community Reinvestment Act covers banks, but actually the majority of mortgage lending and the majority of lots of other types of services are occurring outside of our chartered banks. And so in Illinois, in a number of other states, they have put requirements on credit unions, non-bank mortgage companies, to make sure that they too are serving the community fairly, especially when they're receiving sometimes substantial public subsidies and benefits. So I really think this is one where everyone in this coalition should take a look about how we can make sure that our deposits and our services are actually going to the people who are contributing to it. I'm really worried, Paulina, about the rebuilding of Los Angeles. We know that many of those neighborhoods have been long-standing customers of banks, and I hope that there's some accountability that those financial institutions will be lending as those parts of California need to rebuild. So I hope that each of you really take a hard look at what Rise Economy is trying to push here, because I think this can make a real difference for homeowners, a real difference for small businesses, because otherwise that capital just may be shipped away.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for raising up Altadena and the communities in Los Angeles and the needs they're going to have. As part of the bill that we're running, we are giving extra incentives to financial institutions to rebuild, to help rebuild in Los Angeles or anywhere else there might be a disaster. So we're hoping that that's something that can move forward and help bring some low-cost capital and grants to those communities. Rachel, we heard a lot from our members, especially around the threats to federal funding programs and how that's going to impact, organizations doing really important work on the ground. It's often labeled as, our work is labeled as DEI, and now DEI is being criminalized by the administration. I think there's a lot of fear around this. I think we're even hearing now, right, that tax exempt statuses might be threatened for organizations based on, the work that they do. And I wonder if you can speak to what Democracy Forward is doing to address these cuts and threats, and how we should be thinking about these threats in this moment.
Yeah, so my colleagues at Democracy Forward, along with our valued partners, have been challenging the Trump administration's attacks on DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. There were those 2 executive orders that the president issued targeting DEIA programs, threatening funding for higher education, putting workplaces at risk and cities at risk. So we filed a lawsuit in federal court challenging those executive orders on behalf of educators and the city of Baltimore. We also challenged the Dear Colleague letter that the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights issued, which threatened the loss of funding and enforcement actions against educational institutions that conduct any DEIA programs, or even reference, race or historical events that impacted specific racial groups or ethnicities. We're also challenging the efforts to dismantle the Department of Education. And then earlier this week, we filed a lawsuit challenging the EEOC's letter to law firms requesting data about their employees and applicants as part of an investigation of the firms for DEI-related employment practices. So these attacks on DEIA are coming from all fronts, and they're anti-democratic. And we're appreciative of those who are joining with us to use the courts to challenge them and try to hold the administration accountable. And we've seen the weaponization of federal funding generally be a key tactic of this administration. And this obviously, it hurts people, it hurts communities that rely on these funds. The freezes and the conditioning of these funds is an attack on the essential needs of communities, and they impact not just nonprofit organizations, but businesses too. So we'll continue to challenge the unlawful weaponization of federal funding.
I just want to add one thing to that. I think, and Rachel and her colleagues' work has been tremendously important here. I think it's important to underscore that the president's executive orders on DEIA are totally unnecessary and disingenuous, as everybody, I think, on this call understands. These have nothing to do with combating discrimination, and there are real civil rights laws on the box already available to address real discrimination. And I think that when we see this sort of disingenuous targeting, it threatens to do real damage to the necessary and legitimate enforcement of those laws and the ways that we as a country rely on a rule of law to address unlawful discrimination. I think, as many of the organizations here also understand, these threats are particularly pernicious because not only are they undermining having fairer workplaces, having better programs, having opportunities for people to succeed, having opportunities for our customers to succeed, but that they also have very real impact on the organizations that are trying to navigate threats to funding and threats to their overall structure and approach to work, which is just something that we as a state, as a country, there's potentially just tremendous disruption at the storefront and household and organizational level when we have this like whipsaw of conditions around accessing funds, and a whipsaw around potential vulnerability and targeting because of organizational practices that comport with longstanding laws. So we see these as just like unnecessary, disingenuous. Neither of those are much of a surprise these days, but also really particularly damaging and pernicious for organizations and businesses that are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad we are Democracy Forward and the AG's office are pushing back hard on these efforts. It's really an attack on civil society is really at the heart of authoritarianism, and that's what this is in terms of what we're facing. I want to, before I ask my next question, just encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A. I see one that we'll get to in a minute. I think I might have saw one in the chat, so we'll get to those. But if you can put it in the Q&A, that would be really helpful. Director Chopra, we just thinking about the banking regulators and the importance of the banking regulators in enforcing laws and the economy and the financial system. Recently, DOGE descended on the FDIC. And in February, the FDIC cut, I think, 1,000 new and temporary staff. It really appears to be an escalation by the Trump administration on the banking regulators. We've also seen threats to the independence of the federal financial regulatory agencies. Trump has moved to fire Democrats on the FTC, and the NCUA, the regulator of credit unions, has threatened to fire the Fed chair. And in 2023, we saw these, large bank failures, the largest in recent history. And what do you see as this move towards deregulation, the risk to the banking system and the broader economy as regulatory agencies are weakened and their independence is potentially lost?
Well, it feels like deja vu in some ways, that it was just recently where two major, they were pretty big, these two California banks, Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic, as well as one New York bank, Signature Bank, just collapsed. And it was so severe about a financial system crash that we took votes in the middle of the night to take emergency actions. And some of this was the direct result, in my view, of irresponsible deregulation in the last Trump administration. And it feels like there is just an effort to really inject some short-term profits at really long-term expense to people and the economy. We saw recent actions to raise overdraft fees, to raise credit card fees. I mean, well, none of this is going to actually help people in their household budgets. None of it will help people pay the rent and afford their groceries and gas. So I think that we've seen this before. It doesn't usually end well. But I have to tell you, one of the things that's really weird is it feels like a lot of these actions are not at all about efficiency. I looked at some of the numbers of the first federal employee buyout offer. A lot of people that took them were ones who are already going to retire. How is that efficient? How is it efficient to cut the people who are doing a lot of the technology transformation to reduce costs? It feels like this is not about efficiency, it's about destruction. And what's happening at some of these agencies, Pauline, is everyone is being put on administrative leave, meaning they're being paid to do nothing. They're not doing their investigations, they're not doing their inspections. This just feels like sabotage to me. And it's really, really important that in the cacophony and constant noise of all this news that we don't really lose sight of how the financial impacts will hit Californians and people across the country hard.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel, are you there? I had a question for you. We think about democracy, in the ways that we participate in every day. We think about all the rules that have been put in place over the years, and public comment is such an important piece of that, to be able to comment on these rules, have your voice be heard. It's really central to democracy. It's central to be able to participate in the process. And the administration has stated that it might rewrite some rules, rescind rules without public comment. And can you speak to what rules may be vulnerable to such an effort and what we can do in this moment as communities are trying to be silenced?
This question is for me, right? Sorry, my internet froze for a second. Okay.
Yeah,
Instead of the beginning. Yeah, so recently the president issued an executive order directing the repeal of unlawful regulations. That's the name of the order, that directs agencies to repeal regulations that they deem unlawful without going through notice and comment, which, as you mentioned, is essential and is also legally required. So we think that the executive order is clearly unlawful on its face. For one thing, it cites a variety of recent Supreme Court cases, that the EO claims makes it lawful to do this. None of those cases permit this. None of the cases say that the president has the power now to decide which regulations are lawful or unlawful. That's for courts to decide. And again, as you mentioned, it also says that that these policies that the agencies deem are unlawful can be just repealed without notice and comment. That's not permitted by the Administrative Procedure Act. A final rule that has been issued pursuant to the notice and comment process needs to go through that again to be repealed. An agency needs to do that. So this is a clearly unlawful executive order. This affects many regulations, not just those issued by the CFPB that that protect people against fraud and provide consumer protection, but from all other agencies. So like clean air and water standards, pollution limits, workplace safety measures, many more. It kind of puts at risk rules and regulations that are issued by all of the agencies.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to turn to a couple of questions that I see, one in the chat and one in the Q&A. And the Q&A, we've been working for a long time with our members, our allies around special purpose credit programs. Special purpose credit programs really provide an opportunity and programs and products to be able to get people who've been locked out of mortgages through redlining to be able to participate as borrowers and be able to get a home mortgage loan. And I wonder if any of you can speak to the threat to special purpose credit programs that we're facing in this moment. And the question particularly was, can they be unilaterally terminated by the CFPB or an executive order?
So I'll just weigh in here. Special purpose credit programs have this kind of goofy name, but it's basically just trying to make sure that financial companies are really not having blind spots and not missing out on segments of the population that they might not otherwise be reaching. So to me, the answer on this is no. There's no one who can issue an executive order to stop them from occurring in the market. That being said, it's possible that they could be stopped where there is a government credit program. So, for example, the Federal Housing Administration administers mortgage programs for first-time homeowners. It's possible that they could change their policies. The VA has mortgage programs for veterans. So overall, I think for those individuals who are trying to make sure that lending is reaching everybody, not just a narrow segment of the population, there's a lot of tools to use that. And I think really what Paulina shared about the State Community Reinvestment Act effort is an important one for those who care about these special purpose credit programs as well.
Thank you. We hope to see them continue and banks not to step back from them as these attacks on DEIA continue. And I think there might be a real fear that banks will begin to step back from these programs as we see these attacks. There's a question in the chat, in terms of resources. So, what resources have been allocated by the state and or NGOs to educate the public on these topics that we're talking about today, and that educating the public can be such an important tactic to set the narrative for public debate away from Trump's focus on dividing us by gender, race, class, and immigration and DEIA status. I wonder, maybe Ellie, do you want to speak to some of the resources the AG is garnering around these?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I appreciate, I was just trying to read through it as we were talking here. I really appreciate the introduction to it too, right? Which is that this audience is a very informed one. Individuals and organizations who are already so invested in the kinds of issues that we're talking about here today and have been for years in the middle of this, in good times and in bad times, have been in the midst of the public discourse and the legal fights and the advocacy work to try to create the moment that we have been in the better times, and to respond now when we have the challenges that we do. So it's a great question. In the Attorney General's office, right, we have our core work, which is driven by being the largest law firm in California, as the public office, and doing most of our work in the form of legal work. We also have, through the leadership of the Attorney General in recent years, established a couple of different outreach offices that are really intentionally focused on trying to engage with the business community, to engage with community organizations. I know a number of the participants here have worked with my colleagues Maheen Ahmed and Katarina Nu, and they have built a team to try to directly engage community organizations in the work of the state here. We have also been focused on pushing out information using our communications team and really the bully pulpit that Rob Bonta has as the Attorney General to try to make sure that when we see opportunities for educating the public, educating consumers, educating organizations and small businesses, and the financial institutions and the large businesses as well, that we are using the communications tools that we have. I'll say it is very much a work in progress, right? We don't have a large scale consumer education team. We really rely on the direct work of our community engagement office, and also the amplification of the work that we do through public discourse. So making sure that everybody knows how to find me, how to find my colleagues, and that then we are able to leverage every opportunity that we have. Anytime that I can get the Attorney General to talk about the core issues here, so that then gets picked up and carried forward in the public discourse becomes really important. And then making sure that the consumer alerts and market alerts and legal guidance that we provide get into the right hands, both so that the press picks it up and it can hit mass consumption, and also so that the community organizations and the businesses that rely on this information have it close at hand, whether that's on something like medical debt and credit reporting, on overdraft, or on threats to the Social Security Administration and receipt of benefits, making sure that people have those tools. All of that is available on our website. We do try to push it out, but things also will fall through the gap as we hear so much noise right now. So if you have particular areas of interest where you haven't seen something and you think it would be really useful to hear from our office, definitely reach out.
I'll just add to this, which is, I think that we all want to continue to work with Paulina and Kevin and the team at Rise to really make sure we're contributing to the coalition and giving you timely information as well. I think that all of you who do direct service to your neighbors and your community on housing issues, whatever it may be, when you give that help to them, it's also really important to tell those you serve what is happening and how they can plug in and also be a voice. I think we all need to be raising our voices right now and communicating what is happening to homeowners, small businesses, and others so that we can be ready and organized if a recession does hit.
Great, thank you. Absolutely, we need to be raising our voice, and that's what I really appreciate our members. They provide direct services. They're on the front lines every day in the communities, and they're advocates too. They're advocates for their communities and all the families that they serve. And in this moment, it's what we need more than anything, is that advocacy and that voice. I also want to call out too, we have some foundation partners on the call, to our foundation partners to really step up in this moment and support that advocacy, even when it's really hard. Those voices, uplifting them in this moment, is really important, and the resources are needed to be able to do that. So thank you for your partnership and your support in these times. I have a couple more questions, and then I'll turn it back to Kevin. So speaking about democracy and the rule of law, can you comment on the threats to both of those things when we're seeing an erosion to the separation of powers and our systems of checks and balances? The weight of government is being brought down against those who dissent or based on speech. And it's not even clear that court decisions will be respected. We hear from Democracy Forward all the amazing work that they're doing and the AG is doing. Can you speak to these threats and what we might be thinking about in these moments?
I can go first. So yeah, I'll say that from my perspective, litigating cases against the current administration, it is scary what they're doing. The administration is literally dismantling agency after agency that they just don't like, even though the executive branch has no authority to do that. And I'm talking about agencies big and small, from the Department of Education to USAID to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and of course also the CFPB. And Congress established these agencies by statute, so only Congress can abolish them. The president cannot. So for the executive branch to unilaterally dismantle agencies that that Congress established, violates the separation of powers principles enshrined in our Constitution. It violates several laws, including the Administrative Procedure Act, the statutes that create these agencies. And in many cases, shutting down an agency also violates other laws where Congress mandated that the agency do certain things. So an agency that has no office, no staff, can't get done the tasks that Congress directed it to do. I think this is a really real threat to our democratic system. And so far, I think that we've seen mixed results in the courts, but we have seen some promising decision making and thinking. There have been judges that have been willing to issue TROs, issue preliminary injunctions to stop the government from shutting down agencies, including the preliminary injunction issued in the district court in DC against the shutdown of the CFPB, although that's currently on appeal and the PI has been modified. And it seems that the government is intent on shutting down the CFPB notwithstanding, but it is heartening to see judges that are willing to call it like it is essentially and not let the government get away with violating the Constitution. It's also early in the stages of these litigations, so we don't know what the Supreme Court will do when they address the actual merits of one of these cases.
Thank you, Ellie. What do you say about this kind of erosion of the rule of law and having the Attorney General really as a proponent of the rule of law and pushing this administration to do what it should be doing? And I see Director Chopra has also rejoined us, but I'll turn to you, Ellie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's insane that this is a conversation that we need to have, but it very much is, right? And I think we can't let go of this line of discussion right now. It in many ways, the most important thing that we can do is keep talking about how nuts this is, because we are not the courts, we are not federal jurists. The most important thing we can do is be very actively talking about how crazy this situation is. I think we are seeing that the rule of law is under assault, and we rely on the courts as an essential part of the structure of American government, and an essential part of democracy, and a core tool that we use to hold corporations accountable, a core tool we use to hold the federal government accountable when it's violating the law. We are seeing an increasing confrontation between the president and his administration and the courts, and we don't know where that's going to go yet, but we have to keep. I don't doubt anybody on this call is paying attention to what's happening, but we have to keep a very close eye on what happens and not stop talking about how crazy this moment is. I think we are still a country with a system of laws, still a country with a checks and balances system of government and a separation of powers. And we are still a country where we have I think this backdrop of the rule of law, but we have a president right now that is trying to trample on top of that. And we need to hold fast to the structure that we have and not let him trample on the Constitution.
Director, I know we lost you for a second. Is there anything
Yeah,
you want
sorry, I got kicked out, but I think I heard it. I mean, the one thing I'd say on this is that There's going to be so many complicated legal schmeagle that lots of us won't fully understand. And I think for me, I really want to make sure that it's not just about process or something obscure, but it's actually about really what is happening to people's ability to live their daily lives without fear and with dignity. And a lot of that is about how people can make their bills every month and how they can get ahead. And that's really a place where I think people on this call are so uniquely able to explain to the people that they serve about how some of this norm breaking, law breaking that is occurring is just going to hit the pocketbooks of everybody and really take away opportunities and dignity for their kids and families.
Great, thank you. So just one word from each of you, maybe before we turn it back to Kevin, about sorry for the noise, anything you want to add to give us some hope, anything that you think we should be doing to make a difference in this moment?
I would say rally, connect with each other, speak up, call people in power, and really organize and push together. Every day that we wallow is just another day where things could get worse. And to see people get out, demonstrating, pushing, calling their senators, legislators, every single voice matters right now, and the stakes are high.
Yeah, absolutely. The stakes are exceptional, very high, and we actually have a great deal of energy, a great deal of strength, individually and in particular in coalition here. We have a president that is trying, and an administration and all of his enablers who are trying to flood the zone, trying to overwhelm us, to sow chaos, trying to make it harder for everybody here and for the public to do their job, to live their lives. With this barrage of doom and gloom and the barrage of some very dangerous and illegal action, we need to meet that moment with our own clarity of purpose, strength, voice, community, and to meet it with reason and compassion and facts. And we can do that all the better with partnership and in community.
And I'll just add, keep fighting in whatever form that looks like for you. So if the government is doing something illegal or wrong, which it is, then keep talking about it that way, because we don't want to normalize any of this. And then my personal plea, be a plaintiff, join an amicus brief, get help support litigation where you can. The time to act is before, when there's still something to lose, not after it's already been lost. So the time to act is now. That's my plea.
Well, thank you to all three of you. We appreciate those words of wisdom to fight back, to not let ourselves be wallowing in kind of the fear that can overtake us in these moments. But there's a lot of power on this call, a lot of power in our membership and in communities, and that power can effectively fight back against what's happening as long as we continue moving forward. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it back to Kevin to tell us how we might be able to take some action.
Thank you, Paulina, and thanks to our panelists. What a terrific conversation. We expected no less. Sobering given the times, but uplifting. Paulina reminds us that we are resilient, and we always have been. We will keep fighting. We're urged to raise our voices. That is the essence of what Rise Economy is about. So we will continue to do that. Director Chopra also has us thinking about our homework assignments. So we're going to all think about our homework assignments. Rise Economy members are going to get homework assignments from us from this day forth. Maybe you've gotten some before as well. And specifically, there's a few things that we want to mention to you now while we have your attention. For one, and I think we have a slide that might make this a little easier for people to see, but if you are not a member of Rise Economy and our coalition, you should be. All nonprofits that are mission-based and serving California communities, you should be members of our coalition. To the extent we have success, it's because of the strength of our membership, and our members really inform all the work that we do. So we really encourage your participation. Along the left side of this slide, you see ways to follow us. So we're working on different things, and we try and keep everyone informed. Members have the most information about what we're doing. And for those who are kind of maybe want to check us out a bit, or, you know, busy on doing some other things like serving the community, you can follow us in all of these ways. We mentioned a few times the State Community Reinvestment Act. This is our big policy push, our big legislative push this year. Everyone should be supporting AB 801. If you are not, be in touch with us and we will talk with you about it, and we'll show you how you can support us in this way. And then lastly, I saw John put a chat to this effect. We're fighting, we've got concerns, we've got uphill battles, it feels, but we're also celebrating. So we have our Equitable Futures Award on Thursday, May 16th in Oakland. It would be great to see you all there.
Kevin, that's actually May 15th it should say.
May 15th.
You're
Okay.
gonna stay late if you come on the 16th, but Thursday, May 15th.
Well, it wouldn't be surprising if it's like a 24-hour gala celebration, but better to get there on the 15th, it sounds like. Thank you for that helpful edit, Paulina. If you have any questions about anything you've heard, two people you can contact: me, kstein@riseeconomy.org, or my colleague Josru Bawa, who is our Chief of Organizing and Campaigns, jbawa@riseeconomy.org. Thanks, Josru, for putting in the chat, and it's on this slide. Thank you all for sticking it out, for your participation, for fighting for communities, and thanks again to our panelists. We so appreciate all the work that you have done and that you'll continue to do. We appreciate you and we admire you. And with that, I think we'll close the webinar. Thanks, everybody.